And now we're up to Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis. The Yesh Mikzas Shilya below Vlad. We would have a Havamina based on the Mishnah in Chulin that there could be a Yitzia of Mikzas Shilya and there's no Vlad. And according to the strict letter of the law, only Mikzas Shilya Sheyotza is Asur Bachila, but the rest of the Shilya that remained inside the womb of the animal is not considered a Yitzia, and the Shechita of the mother would be meaningful for the Mikzas Shilya that still is inside the mother's body. We said that the entire Shilya in the Mishnah in Chulin is Asur Bachila. That was only Mitzad Derabanan, Mitzad Gzera of Mikzas Atu Kula. That since if the entire Shilya had exited the body of the Behema, for sure we would say there's a Vlad, because that's not Mikzas Shilya, that's Kol HaShilya. And therefore, if, let's say, for example, the Shilya would go back into the mother's body, it would not be mutter in the Shechita of the mother, because with the Yitzia, it's considered already outside the body of the mother, and it needs its own shechita. Kamash Malon, this is the chiddush of Ula, that ein Mikzas Shilya below Vlad, and the Isur of Achil on the Shilya is not mitzad gzera, but rather it's a safek doraisa. And therefore, even in the case of an Isha, as we apply the same yardstick, when Mikzas Shilya comes out, we're already going to be mitameh on Yom Rishon mitzad safek. Now we get to another statement of Ula in the name of Rabbi Lazar, with regard to Pidyon Haben. The Omar Ula Amar Rabbi Lazar bechor shenitra b'toch shloshim yom ein podin oso. If there was a fetus inside a woman's body, and she doesn't have yet petarechem, but unfortunately the fetus died in a very short period after birth. So on the one hand, the fetus was Peter Rechem, and therefore we would need a Pidyon Haben of 5 slum to the Kohen. But since the Vlad did not live and was not viable for a period of 30 days after its later, then there's no Pidyon Haben. We're not going to say that immediately with the later, the Bechor is Chayav and Pidyon Haben. Again, this is a chiv on the father. The Chen Tani, and this statement of Rabbi Lazar was supported by a brisa that was quoted by Rami Bar Choma, and the brisa says that mitoch shenemar pados sifdeh yochal, I might think afilu nitra b'toch shloshim yom Talmud lomer ach. The pasuk says ach pados sifdes bechor ha'odam. This is Bamidbar Yudches, and ach is a miut, which is called ach chilek, which means that not all cases are Yuchayv and Pidyon Haben. It's coming to exclude a case of a Bechor that died within 30 days of its birth and Yapotu from Pidyon Haben. Because basically, Lo Yotza Mechlal, a Nefel until after 30 days. Another statement of Ula in the name of Rabbi Lazar. V'Omer Ula Rabbi Lazar Behema Gasa Niknes B'Mashicha. A behema gasa, which is a live animal like an ox or a donkey, there's a big issue about whether or not Mashicha is a kinyan in which the koneh, the lokeach, is moshech the behema from the rishus of the mocher into his rishus, and is Mashicha a valid kinyan with regard to behema gasa? V'anan tanan, how could a Rabbi Lazar classify behema gasa as a behema equal to a behema daka, subject to kinyan Mashiach of Hanan Tanan? We have a Mishnah Masechet Kiddushin Adaf Chafei Amid Beis that a behema gasa niknes b'mesira, that there are reins on the animal and the makna hands over the reins to the lokeach. But Mashiach from the rishus of the mocher into the rishus lokeach is not an effective kinyan with regard to a behema gasa. So Mashiach is not Kona. So how could Rabbi Lazar go against the Mishnah And the Gemara answers that indeed it's a machlokes tanoim, and Rabbi Elazar holds like one particular tana, hu domer ki haitana tisanya v'chacham omrim, and this is the shita that's most relevant for us for Rabbi Elazar, zo v'zu b'meshicha, meaning whether it's a behema daka, like a small sheep, or a behema gasa, like a large ox, in both cases, meshicha is konen. Rabbi Shimon Omer, zo v'zo b'hagba. Rabbi Shimon is a third sheet. Until now, we said that a behema gasa, according to the bar pluta of Rabbi Elazar, or of the Chachamim, would hold mesira, and Rabbi Shimon says no, that the kinyan is hagba, not meshicha and not mesira. So we have three sheets, and Rabbi Elazar holds like the Chachamim. The Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Elazar, another statement of Ula in the name of Rabbi Elazar. What number is this? I think this is number 4 already, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is Ha'achim Shecholku. Now we're talking about a Yerusha that was inherited by the brothers, and they made a division. What happens with begadim that they're wearing on their body? Mashal leim shomin, umashal b'neiim b'neiseim ein shom. Rabbi Elazar made a statement that even the begadim that they're wearing are included and encompassed in the Yerusha, and therefore they have to be calculated in the Chalukah. So we're going to make a shuma, we're going to evaluate how much the begadim that they're wearing is worth, and that money will be included in the Chalukah. However, the begadim that are being worn by their children or their grandchildren, I should say the grandchildren of the person who died, and whether or not it's a ben or a bas, those begadim on the apparel that's being worn by the grandchildren, the next generation, ein shom. And the reason for this is that it's a bizayon to go to Bezdin. So imagine that we're going to require that these banim and banos have to come into Bezdin in order to evaluate the begadim. That's not generally the custom, and therefore we don't have to be mavayish them by bringing them into Bezdin. There are cases in which even when the first generation, meaning the heirs, are wearing begadim, we don't do a shuma, and everybody agrees that whatever they're wearing is theirs. You don't have to divvy it up. And mishkachas le begadol achei. If there's a mature or the oldest one of the achim, and he got involved in the chalukah, in a sense, he's basically representing the achim because he's the most mature of them, and he's going to be in charge of divvying up the estate of the father with all the nechasim, is nichalahu. They are very happy, the brothers, if they will be represented by their oldest brother, who's going to show up in these beautiful garments, dilishtam and mili, because when you show up in a bezdin and you look like and project an image of an adam chashuv, then your words have more of a power. So let him keep the begadim, and the mela, all the other begadim are kept by each one of the Yosh. Another statement of Ula in the name of Rabbi Elazar, and this is the famous sugi of Shomer Shemasal Shomer. The first Shomer decided that he's going off to Florida. He wants to give it over to another Shomer. Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Elazar, Shomer Shemasal Shomer is potter. We do not define passing on the shmir as pshia. It's within the purview and the permission of the first shomer to pass over the object for shmira to the second shomer. Lomi, boy, it goes without saying in the case of shomer chinu shemasal shomer sacha diluye aliyah l'shmirasa. If the shomer chino gave it over to a shomer sacha, so the second shomer is being paid for his shmira, therefore he's chayav for gneva v'aveda. He has to give what's called a shmira ma'ula. So then for sure we understand that by upgrading the level and the standards of shmira, that's not called pshia. Even if a paid shomer who's chayav to give shmir ma'ula and it'll be chayav for Gneva Aveda. He gives over the object to a shomer chidam. He's not considered a Pashea. Why not? As long as the shomer is giving over the shmira to someone who's a vendas, who's capable of providing a basic level of shmira, it's not a pshia. Rav Omar, it's just the opposite. Shomer shemasel shomer chayev, and this is based on a principle of shvua. Every shomer, if the object is lost, has to take a shvua. And when the mafkid decides to whom he wants to deposit the object to the shomer, he decides who's neman, who's trustworthy in his eyes for a shvua. Therefore, shomer shemasel shomer chayev. A shomer who gives over the shmir, the object, to another shomer is chayav for onsen. Lomi boy goes without saying in shomer sachar shemasel shomer chiyim degrui gar l'shmirasa. When he gives him over to a shomer chinam and he lowers the level to a basic shmira, that for sure is a pshia. That goes without saying. Elafilu shomer chinam shemasel shomer sachar, and he's upgrading the level of shmira. Even in this case, chayav, and it'll be chayav in onsen. Because a posheh is chayav also. What's the pshia of giving it over to a shomer sachar? You would think that, on the contrary, he's upgrading the level of shmira. And the Gemara answers, the Amalei, the mafkid always has a right to say to the shomer, At mehemnis li b'shvua, haich lo mehemni li b'shvua. I gave it to you specifically because in my eyes, you're a trustworthy, loyal person who would never lie under oath. And I trusted your oath. It means that the Chi of Shvua is an integral part of Shmira. And when the Mafkid gives over the object to a Shomer, included in the Hafkada is the commitment on the part of the Shomer to take a Shvua. And the Mafkid has das to give the object over to someone who, in event that the object is destroyed or lost, he, the shomer, is neman, is believed and trusted in his shvua in the eyes of the mafkid. But when you give it over to someone else, that's an act of pshit. Another statement of Ula in the name of Rabbi Loza. V'amar Ula of Rabbi Loza, Hilchas hagovim in avodim. If, let's say, Ruvain borrows money from Shimon, and Ruvain defaults on the loan, he doesn't have cash to pay back the 1,000 zuz, then Shimon could confiscate the Eved Knani of Ruvain the Lova. The Malva has rights and shibudim to collect from the Lova. Now, at this point in the sugya, before the Gemara backtracks, we're talking about what's called B'nei Chori, meaning the Eved Knani is in the possession. He has not been sold by the Lova, and in event that the Lova doesn't have cash to pay the Malva takes the Eved in lieu of the Chov of the debt as payment for the Halva. So when Ula made this statement in the name of Rabbi Lazar, Rav Nachman asked Ula the following question. Amar le Rav Nachman le'Ula. That statement that you said, that you transmitted in the name of Rabbi Lazar, afilu miyasme. What happens in event that Ruvain dies, and when Shimon comes to collect alva, he has to collect it from Chanoch ben Ruvain, the Yisomim. Can he collect from the Eved Knani? And basically what this depends upon is what's the status of an Eved Knani as far as Gvias Chov. Does he have the status of a Karka? Because we have a principle called Eved Hukash LeKarka. Or should we say no, that since the Eved is movable, he jumps around, therefore he has the status of Metaltal. And Ula responds to Rav Nachman Lo, that Rabbi Loza was not addressing the case of Yisomim, but rather Minei. If the Lov himself is alive, the Eved Knani is not considered karka that could be collectible from the Yisomim, but rather like metaltalin, and it's b'nei chorin, and therefore you could collect the Eved Knani from the Lova himself if the Lova is alive, but not from the Yisomim, because the Eved does not have the status of karka, which is collectible from the Yisomim if they inherit karka from their father, but rather metaltal. So if Nachman is not happy with this, he does not accept the response of Ula to his question. Are you telling me that when you quoted and transmitted halacha, the name of Elazar, that the Malva could collect from the Eved Kanani of the Lova? He was talking about a case where the Eved Kanani is in the possession of the Lova, who's alive and well. Afilu miglimid al kaspe. He can collect from the clothing on the body of the Lova. Means all metaltal is included under Bnei Chori for collection of the Chol. So if it's Milsa the Pshita that he would collect from the Eved, could it be that you transmitted this brand new halach in the name of Elazar? It's Milsa the Pshita. So Ula responds, now is where the Gemara introduces the possibility of the Malva's rights to collect from the Eved Kanani, even after the Eved Kanani was sold by the Lova to a Lokeach. And now the Malva is going to get rights to confiscate the Eved Kanani from the Lokeach, from the buyer, which means that the Eved Kanani has a shibud nechasim, and we assume that when a person buys anything from a Lova that has a shibud on it, he understands full well that the day might come in which the object that he's purchasing might be confiscated from him in event that the Lova, who's the mocher, runs out of cash. So now the case is, says Uma, and this is the big chiddush of Rabbi Elazar, the gigantic chiddush of Rabbi Elazar, that there's a shibud on the Eved such that if the Lova sells his Eved Knani to a Lokeach, the Malva has recourse to collect and confiscate the Eved Knani from the hands of the Lokeach. But it's only in the case of Asoa Potiki. Why? Kida Rav. The Omar Rava Asa Avda Potiki Umacharo Balchov Gove Heimenu. What's apotiki? Apotiki is when the Malva says to the Lova, I want you to designate a specific piece of property that you own for purpose of my gvia for collection of the chov, an event that you default on the loan. And that's called apotiki miloshen mipo. From this tike, you will have the rights to own it. Now, we're going to see in a minute that whether the Lokeach is responsible to pay up for the shibud of the lova, the mocher, depends upon kol, kuf, vav, lam. Shoro apotiki macharo ein bal chov gove menu. If the lova agrees to designate a shor as an apotiki to the malva, and then he went ahead, missed the lova, and he sold the shor to someone else, that Lokeach is not responsible to forfeit the shor for payment of the chov of the malva. The malva has no rights to collect his chov from the shor that was sold from the lova to the malva. My timer. What's the difference between eved and shor? Ha islay kola, ha leslay kola. When an eved becomes an apotiki, it's public knowledge. And therefore, the Lokeach knew very well to be careful when he purchased the Eved Knani, because there was a shibud and a lien on the Eved Knani of an apotiki, which was well known. However, in the case of a shor, less like kola, nobody knows the difference between one shor and another, and nobody's going to recognize that there's a shibud on the shor, and therefore we have to make what's called the takonas halekuchos, that even in the case of an apotiki, the Lokeach is not responsible to back up the chov through the shor because there's no kol, and we cannot demand and expect that the Lokeach would know and be aware of the fact that he was buying something which had a lien on it. And here we turn to the Yud Beis. Lebasa bin Nafat, after Rav Nachman left, Amalei Ula said to those who were sitting in his presence, Hachi Amar Abelazar, Afilu miyasmi. In other words, Rabbi Elazar took it one step further. And he said that just like Yisomim who inherit karka from their father, the Baal Chova, their father could come and collect the karka and confiscate it, so too in the case of an Eved that has the same status as karka, if the Baal Chov comes after the death of the Lova to collect his Chov from the Yisomim, he can collect it from the Eved. Amar Rav Nachman, when the words of Ula, these last words, were conveyed to Rav Nachman, ishtamtin Ula. Ula was nowhere to be found. And that's called hishtamet mimenu. And basically what Rav Nachman's saying is that Rabbi Lazar, when he said Goven avodim milekuchos, it's only in the case of an apoteki. But to say, therefore, that an eved has the din of karka, and therefore you can collect from these sobim as if it was karka that they inherited from the father, that was never said. And I'm going to prove to you, and that's the sugya we'll do tomorrow, that an eved has the status of metaltal, and therefore cannot be collected from the Yisomim. The Yisomim are only responsible and can be collected by the Malva after the death of the Lova from Karak. Okay, then, so this is where we're up to. Let's make a note for tomorrow. On Daf Yud Beis.